There are moments when a public figure stops being a brand and becomes a case study, when the image they spent decades polishing finally collides with what was happening behind the scenes. And right now, that is exactly what's happening to Sean Diddy Combs. This isn't just a scandal or a fall from grace. It's the unraveling of a system he built, piece by piece, believing it would never turn against him. What's shocking is not just the accusations, the lawsuits, or the federal investigation. It's the footage that no one outside his inner circle was ever supposed to see, until now. For years, Diddy lived with cameras as if they were an extension of his body. He hired videographers to follow him everywhere, in hotel suites, on jets, during rehearsals, in meetings, even during tense conversations with lawyers. He wasn't documenting music history, he was documenting himself. He wanted a digital archive of his life, something he could eventually shape into the definitive Diddy story. But here's the twist. The archive didn't stay in his hands. Netflix obtained hours of private, pre-arrest material, footage showing a version of Diddy that the public had never seen. Agitated, worried, confused, pacing through luxury suites, calling for strategy meetings, whispering about indictments, demanding his team fix the narrative faster. There are moments where he shakes hands with fans, then immediately asks for sanitizer and a bath. Moments where he insists his circle isn't working hard enough to keep things from falling apart. Moments that reveal a man who sensed the walls closing in, even before the world saw it. And yes, the obvious question is the one everyone keeps asking. How did Netflix get footage that private and that sensitive without Diddy's approval? The answer is embarrassingly simple. In entertainment, if you hire someone to film you and you don't pay them, the footage isn't yours. It belongs to the person behind the camera. And multiple insiders claim the videographer behind some of this material was never fully compensated. If true, that person had every legal right to license or sell the footage, and Netflix has one of the strongest legal teams in the industry. They don't release anything they can't defend. So while Diddy was trying to control his own narrative and even reportedly negotiating a documentary deal before his arrest, he may have sabotaged himself. The man who built an empire on influence and image lost control of both because he didn't settle a bill. But the footage is only the surface of the story. What it reveals is the mindset of someone who believed he could outrun accountability forever. Behind the private jets, the mansions, and the aura of limitless wealth, Diddy was not nearly as financially secure as people assumed. He was rich, yes, but his lifestyle required constant liquidity. Staff, pilots, security, chefs, assistants, maintenance teams, tens of thousands of dollars in monthly overhead. And once the lawsuits began piling up, once the investigation started, once lawyers entered every corner of his life, the cost of maintaining that facade skyrocketed. Insiders say he even turned his private jet into a high-end rental to generate fast cash. A single flight could bring in tens of thousands, but compared to the legal expenses mounting behind the scenes, it wasn't enough. And the same pattern kept repeating. He supported multiple households, partners, ex-partners, and insiders whose silence or loyalty came with a price. Even the wild rumors, like paying $250,000 a month to one girlfriend, were exaggerated. But the truth still added up. The expenses were real, the pressure was real, and the liquidity wasn't. As this financial strain grew, something else was happening quietly in the background. People around him began to talk. For decades, Diddy's world functioned on three pillars: loyalty, fear, and dependency. People stayed close because the lifestyle was good, because the consequences of stepping away felt unpredictable, or because speaking out seemed impossible. But loyalty becomes fragile when money stops flowing, and fear becomes fragile when power weakens. The moment that Netflix footage leaked, it signaled something bigger than a documentary release. It signaled that the ecosystem surrounding him, the one he depended on, was cracking. Assistants, former partners, insiders, people who once kept quiet suddenly felt less bound to the silence that protected him for so long. And then came the federal raid. According to reports, when agents entered his Park Hyatt suite before his arrest, They found evidence that contradicted the glamorous image he projected publicly. Items associated with coercive environments, controlled spaces, and substances that raised even more questions. That footage, combined with the findings from the raid, painted a picture of a man who had been hiding far more than he ever admitted. But one of the most unsettling shifts in this entire saga came during the trial, when two jurors, appearing in the documentary, explained how they interpreted what they heard in court. One of them admitted struggling to separate toxic relationship behavior from criminal behavior. Another suggested that some of the patterns described felt like complicated love, not a crime. Their comments reflect a problem far bigger than Diddy. For years, society normalized controlling or aggressive behavior inside relationships, especially when the man was powerful, wealthy, or culturally influential. Older generations were raised on messages that blurred the line between passion and domination. Those beliefs show up everywhere, including in jury boxes. And the documentary forces viewers to confront how deeply cultural attitudes can shape judgments, even in the most serious trials. But beyond the jurors, the documentary also highlights the internal logic of abusive environments: silence rewarded, resistance punished, loyalty tied to financial or emotional dependency. Many of the women in Diddy's orbit weren't simply partners or companions. They were people living under conditions where leaving meant losing not only material stability, but a sense of identity shaped around proximity to him. This is why, for many survivors today, experts emphasize the importance of documenting everything: screenshots, messages, photos, evidence saved quietly for the moment when the truth finally becomes necessary. Because when power dynamics are unequal, documentation becomes protection. And the documentary echoes that point in a way that resonates far beyond Diddy's case. Still, the most revealing theme woven into this story isn't the psychology, the culture, or even the allegations. It's the pattern. The same pattern that strained Diddy's business relationships, damaged his partnerships, and fueled resentment inside his circle. He didn't pay people. Not fairly. Not consistently. Not respectfully. Former assistants say they felt exploited. Collaborators claim he cheated them out of deals. Partners allege financial manipulation. And the videographer, whose footage is now reaching millions, appears to be the ultimate example of how that behavior backfired. Diddy built a system where people depended on him. But he maintained that system with pressure instead of respect, and with financial leverage instead of trust. When that leverage weakened, people who once stayed silent no longer did. This is why the documentary hits so hard. Not because it exposes one man, but because it exposes the cost of a system built on control. It shows how fast loyalty evaporates when fear fades, and how quickly an empire collapses when the people holding it together decide they're done protecting it. And in the end, the irony is almost too sharp to ignore. The footage that now defines Diddy's downfall didn't come from an enemy. It didn't come from law enforcement or a rival. It came from someone inside his world, someone he underestimated. Someone who filmed him because he wanted a legacy. Someone he didn't pay. A career built on influence was disrupted by a simple rule. If you don't honor your agreements, someone else eventually will. If you don't treat people fairly, someone eventually walks away with the truth. If you build your world on control, you lose at the moment control slips. Diddy never imagined the cameras following him would one day expose him. He never imagined the people closest to him would speak publicly. He never imagined jurors would question what they heard in ways the world now debates. He never imagined the financial machine behind his lifestyle would fail at the exact moment he needed it most. But that's the real story here. Not the celebrity, not the mogul, not the legend, the pattern, because no matter how powerful someone becomes, one rule always applies. What you refuse to confront eventually confronts you. And sometimes it comes back as footage the world was never supposed to see.